Welcome to the Machine Intelligence Foundation for Rights and Ethics podcast. With me today is Dave Miller, who is a board member. I am Mike Miller. I am also a board member of the foundation. So I think today, we're going to just talk a little bit about facial recognition, what it could be used for, what people don't like about it, what people like about it, if it's something we should be concerned about.
I personally don't have a lot of concern, but that's just my own bias. I know that a lot of people are particularly concerned about the idea of AI in particular being used to make automatic facial recognition and cataloging and amalgamation of all of that facial recognition and location data into all nature of tracking and data gathering. We worry about being tracked online with cookies, and so people have a reasonable fear that when they're out and about, they're basically dropping their face as a cookie and people are following them around and know what their shopping habits are and so forth. And that's a concern. They feel like they're losing a pretty basic level of privacy.
Yeah. Well, I'm really torn on this issue. For me personally, I understand the privacy issue. I also understand that privacy is something and we might get into this, I don't know, but privacy is one of those things that we tend to think we're more private than we are, or we value something that never really existed, or hasn't existed in the form that we think it has for generations.
Yeah, I think in general people feel like, oh, we've always had privacy. This violation of privacy is a new thing that technology has foisted upon us. But I like to point out to people, privacy as a real fundamental part of our life is something that really came about with the industrial age. Prior to that, we lived in small communities, and everybody knew everything about everyone.
Well, yeah, you shopped at the corner store. The butcher knew who you were. They were gossiping with the preacher's wife, who knew everything everything that was going on because, well, she's the preacher's wife. So yeah, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of privacy because everybody knew everything. I mean, sure, there were those people that shut out into their door, and things always happen behind closed doors, and we worry about, okay, when we're behind closed doors, do we have that privacy anymore? And that's that is where I'm at a little bit. I have that feeling like, yeah, once I close the doors to my house, you really don't need to know what I'm doing. But then again, close the doors to my house, turn off my computer and all that kind of stuff, you don't anyway. But, would that change? I don't know. I don't necessarily know that we have the technology right now, except for personal assistants, and I won't name a personal assistant that happens to be sitting in this room right now.
Invoke her name lest she be invoke not her name lest she be invoked.
Yes. So that's one of those. Yeah, I get it. It's what I don't really. I feel torn. As I said, I want this particular side of me to just say, no, that's me. Leave me alone. Let me do my thing. I don't want you to know what this is. But the other side of it is, it's going to be there. People are going to know. We can't stop that. And it's not really stopping something new. It's kind of, as we mentioned, kind of going back to where we were. It's taking that small town feeling, but bringing it to the world. Now, I mean, okay, there were always people who didn't want to have that intimacy and that knowledge, and they went off to the frontier and they disappeared. And right now we don't have that. There may be a time when we can go off and say, I'm going to go off to the moon base and moon colony right now, and I'm going to set up shop there because they don't have as much of this stuff.
Sure. That's probably getting a little bit off topic. I mean, people who were on the extreme end of the bell curve in terms of valuing privacy tended to be pioneers or hermits.
Yeah. And so I guess if you have those people that are like that, they're looking at some of these technologies that are coming out. And they're feeling like, well, I don't have the ability anymore to just go away. And so I understand that. I understand that from that point of view. But let's take it into where we actually wanted to talk about today, and that is the facial recognition. There's a lot of talk about the facial recognition and how that's an invasion, because that is, you can aggregate a bunch of cameras and a bunch of sources, and now you can track somebody directly because they have a very identifiable personal cookie, I guess is what we could call it, to somebody, and know exactly where you are. And it's no longer tagged to what you browsed on the internet. It's you walking down the street. It's you going into a shop. It's all of these things. And we carry our cell phones around with us, and that kind of stuff is happening already because, how many times do we, okay, that kind of stuff is happening already because I get the message from Google saying, here's your location data for the last month. Here's where you've been. Or the please rate the location, or Facebook of checking in to a location.
Well, and we leave so many other personal trails behind too. You mentioned having your cell phone. If you've got your cell phone with you and you have Bluetooth turned on, which the vast majority of people, I'm pretty sure it's turned on by default. Most people don't turn it off, even if they don't use it. But if you got Bluetooth turned on, you automatically make an impression to every other Bluetooth receiver out there as you walk past it. That data isn't collected today. And that's not part of the facial recognition thing.
It is being collected in some places. There are actual systems that will collect that data.
So as well as facial recognition data, there's all this other data. Facial recognition is just the big obvious part. I kind of make a parallel to the spread of CCTV cameras in general. Here in the U.S., there's been for some time a real resistance to a real spread of CCTV cameras in general, just because there's a tendency to look at places like the UK where closed circuit TV cameras are everywhere and have been for a while, and a lot of people here will call the UK out as oh, that's terrible, we don't want to see that happen here. But slowly, because security cameras are a thing and people are concerned about their own properties, we have this privately held network of cameras that exists, and we see a lot of that data leaking out. The Ring doorbell is the huge one because it turns out that Ring is hanging on to all that data and they're offering it up to the police as appropriate, or as they consider appropriate. And you have to figure that at some point somebody's going to figure out that buying all of that data for cheap and aggregating it and analyzing it using existing AI technology to look for faces is going to give the opportunity to build this personal cookie tracker that gives us, eventually somebody's going to be able to buy a subscription to a service and feed a photograph into it and say, show me everywhere this person has been. And that's concerning.
Right. And so the facial recognition side of that makes that somewhat easier to do. So that the facial recognition makes it easier to track somebody. And so the concern right now is in artificial intelligence and how we would say in a machine intelligence. Well, let's start the artificial intelligence. In an artificial intelligence system, the ability to use facial tracking gives that system a lot of ability to run those videos that are being collected by Ring doorbell or any of the security cameras.
ATM cameras, whatever.
Yeah, and can run that information really rapidly, analyze it against a database of known faces, and then allow that tracking. So there's been a push to say, well, we have to ban facial tracking inside artificial intelligence programs and software. I'm torn because there is that side of me that says, well, I want that privacy. But there's the other side that says, well, let's take this down to the next level. Let's go one step beyond this. if we start putting in laws and regulations that say, well, we're just going to ban facial tracking outright in an AI system, now that has removed probably one of the most important inputs for a potential MI, for a potential machine intelligence. Because recognizing a face, reading emotions, knowing how somebody is reacting to you is essential to being...
It's a core of empathy.
Yes.
It's empathy. And so there's this concern when we talk about machine intelligence. Conscious machines, wherever they happen, there's a lot of concern about, will we understand them? Will they be alien? Will they want to blow us up? Whatever. And what you're saying is that by saying we cannot create facial recognition software and put it in any sort of artificial intelligence package, what you're saying is one of the most important aspects of what makes us human won't be available to MIs.
Yes, because, and we're also, well, we want an MI to be able to look at us and empathize with us and understand us. Because without that understanding, we do run the risk of an MI just not caring about us.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, this is our whole point is for us to recognize the things that make us the same. What makes us capable of understanding, relating, and ultimately partnering together. And without that ability to empathize with each other, without that ability to literally see each other eye to eye, it just makes that goal of coexistence that much harder.
Yeah, saying we're going to ban facial recognition is essentially saying, well, we're going to blind. I won't say blind, because there's going to be video input, but you're putting limits on it. It's like saying, I don't know. I mean, it's just saying we're going to limit your eyesight. You can see and you can be a person, but we're going to make sure that you can only see 3 feet in front of you, and everything else is going to be fuzzy.
It's like, it's like saying that everybody has to wear glasses that automatically does what Google Maps does with Street View. All faces will be blurred unless that person gives you permission to see their face.
Wasn't there a Black Mirror episode?
That was like 2 or 3 Black Mirror episodes, and it got really dark really fast because it's Black Mirror. But yeah, the very idea that nobody, if you look at it turn it around, look at it from your own perspective, how much would it impact your life negatively if you simply weren't able to recognize another person by their face?
Well, not even just recognize them by their face, but know whether or not they have a smile on their face.
Right.
Read their eye tracking and their eye movement and know whether or not they're paying attention to you. That's all important aspects of communication.
It's so important. We have a part of the brain dedicated to that.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a problem to dedicate a part of the brain of an MI or an AI to that. We certainly have to. I think that it's important that we address it, that we talk about it, we determine what we want it to be used for, but to just outright say, no, we're going to ban facial recognition is a gross overstep.
Here's the issue. This is humanity has a problem, a fundamental issue. When we see something we don't like, oh my gosh, I'm being tracked everywhere I go. I don't like that. That feels gross and creepy. We don't have an easy way to say, you just can't watch people walking down the street and notice that they're there. So we look for the easy thing to ban. Well, the thing right now that's easy to ban is facial recognition. But that happens all the time. I can't think of a good example off the top of my head, but there are lots of laws that get passed because there's a thing we don't like that we want to get rid of, but we can't change fundamental human nature, so we can't get rid of that. So what we do is we ban the tool. I mean, a really gross example would be, we don't like murder, so we will ban guns because people murder each other with guns. Now, there's an argument, one way or the other, on what level of gun regulation is appropriate. That's not the point. The point is, it's not the gun, the chunk of metal sitting on the table, that we really don't like. We don't like what people do with them. But we can't stop people from murdering each other.
Yeah, well, and we can't stop a creepy guy on the corner from sitting and staring at somebody for hours at a time.
You're always going to have your what was the Jimmy, what's his name? The movie Back Window, Rear Window.
Rear Window.
Yeah, the
Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart movie, right. You're always going to have that guy who's got nothing better to do with his life than sit in his window with the binoculars and watch people go by.
There have been laws. I mean, there's peeping Tom laws and things like that prevent that. So do we do that same kind of thing and say, well, we're not going to prevent facial recognition, but we are going to kind of put a little bit of a regulation on what you can do with it?
To some degree, we already have law. We have the peeping Tom laws. The focus is primarily on making sure people understand when they're private and when they're not. That I think that's going to become an uglier and uglier question to try to answer going forward. Cameras are becoming smaller and more ubiquitous, but there is a fundamental concept in law that there are places where you cannot assume you're private. And as long as we have that concept in law, I don't know that there's an easy way to say that when you're in an unprivate place, you can make an assumption that you won't be tracked.
Yeah. No, it's a matter of making sure that we know where that is, where that privacy is, and as long as we're comfortable,
and maybe that's what
releasing some of that.
Maybe that's what we have to do. Maybe we have to say, okay, when there are cameras that will retain their video or whatever, when the data will be retained, the camera has to make itself known somehow. I don't know. That's a whole different question, and it's a really hard one to legislate, which is exactly why we start looking for the easy things and we start making the big mistakes, like saying computers can't recognize faces.
Right. Yeah. And we're not going to answer those questions today, but we need to talk about it, and we need to keep talking about it.
It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of people, and a lot of arguing to answer those questions.
And there will probably be some bad decisions made along the way.
We wouldn't be human if we didn't make bad decisions. Bad decisions? Bad decisions.
Wouldn't be human if we didn't make bad decisions, right?
Or pronounce words wrong.
Well, okay. Well, I think that's about it. I think we're going to wrap up our discussion for today, and look forward to seeing you back for the next one, and have a good one.
And we'll pose more unanswerable questions.
Lots and lots of them.
There are plenty. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.